UFC Fight Night this Saturday has one of the biggest fights for the light heavyweight division in the UFC, and that's Jan Blachowicz versus Aleksandar Rakic. And this fight is going to have fireworks. I'm looking forward to it, and there is so many questions, for both of these fighters, and who's gonna challenge the Glover Texeira for the belt next? Because Jan Blachowicz looked really, really bad in his last fight. Then, preparing for this fight, he got injured, so the fight had to be postponed, and now the fight is happening finally. So, did Jan Blachowicz recover? Did he work on his mental techniques? Did he work on this fight at all? Does he still have it to be the champion? So, let's go over the fight, let's go over the fighters, and let's see who has the bigger chance of winning. First of all, let's introduce the challenger, Aleksandar Rakic. Aleksandar Rakic is a Serbian fighter who is predominantly very heavy in the stand-up, very good. He started his MMA career with the kickboxing, so if someone starts with the kickboxing, usually they keep it standing. And he looks good, some of his KOs and head kick KOs, oh my god, they look so good, so explosive, and it basically catapulted his career to the top of the UFC. However, when we see him, when he fought Thiago Santos, finally some notorious opponent, then he was afraid to pull the trigger. It was one of the most boring fights in the UFC, but it felt like Aleksandar Rakic has the tool set, has the skill set, believes in himself. He just is afraid to pull the trigger sometimes, and that's what we've seen against Thiago Santos. So I hope that Aleksandar Rakic will come guns blazing to this fight and can actually capitalize on Jan Blachowicz and his unsuccessful title defense against Glover Texeira. So Aleksandar Rakic looks good, looks prepared. I just really hope that he's mentally prepared and that he will have a good corner advice if something does not go right. Jan Blachowicz. Now let's switch to Jan Blachowicz because that's where all the questions are. Because Jan Blachowicz, he's one of those fighters he lost earlier in his career, then he reinvented himself, came back, went on a huge winning streak, defeated the big names of the sport, became the champion by defeating Dominic Reyes, who was a really good fighter, especially when we've seen Dominic Reyes fight John Jones, and then Jan Blachowicz just humiliated and KO'd Dominic Reyes. That was great. Or when he shut up Luke Rockhold, when he knocked him out, that was one of the most satisfying knockouts of all time, right? But Jan Blachowicz lost hard to Glover Texeira. There was just something not right. Glover Texeira came there, wrestled into the ground in the first round, and just submitted him. Something was not right with Jan Blachowicz in that fight. Something was not right. So what could happen? Because a fight before that was against Israel Adesanya, one of the best strikers in the UFC, and Jan Blachowicz looked great. Holy shit, he manhandled Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya didn't have anything to show for that fight. So how can one fighter, be so high at one point and then just fall off the cliff? How can that happen? I believe there is few things that we can go over it. First of all, Jan Blachowicz is a very humble guy. However, there has to be a line, if you get very friendly, too friendly with someone, you might not be able to switch that killer mindset inside of the cage. Even though Jan Blachowicz was humble his whole time, he never was way too friendly like he was with Glover Texeira. He sang him happy birthday and he gave him a beer during a press conference. He never did that, So I think he was either overly too friendly with the guy, maybe that was first thing. And second thing, Jan Blachowicz became a father, and this is a known fact. Some fighters, once they became fathers, that killer switch just turns off. Something just happens inside of their heads that they are not those killers anymore. And a lot of commentators, a lot of analysts, and a lot of professional fighters spoke on this issue. And that might have been happening with Jan Blachowicz going into that fight. Because Glover Texeira was basically just wrestling everyone and putting on the ground and pound. And Jan Blachowicz has the grappling skills, to oppose that wrestling. Like his start into like his journey into the MMA was through the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he competed on some tournaments, and he has black belt under Dean Lister, who is a big name on the Jiu-Jitsu scene. So Jan Blachowicz basically just gave up mentally. Something happened there that wasn't right. And that's why we have all these questions like, did Jan Blachowicz fix it? He said he worked on the mental part, on the mental preparation, but is that really it? Is it because he's a father? Or was he way too friendly with the guy? What went wrong in that fight? I think it's the part where Jan Blachowicz became a father and fought someone, who is also an older guy, also had up and downs, like someone he could relate to, He didn't feel like, oh, I'm the challenger, like I fight for the title with Dominic Reyes, and then my first defense is freaking Israel Adesanya, one of the best strikers in the UFC. Like that itself just keeps you awake, But when you're just like, okay, I'm gonna fight, I defended against Israel Adesanya, so it means like I'm pretty good, my confidence is really high. And now I'm going against this, 40-year-old guy who's like has similar career as me. He has a birthday during the week. Oh my god, like, and I got a kid, so I have my son in my mind all the time. I'm just so happy and so satisfied. I'm finally making a lot of money. So all these things can basically just upset you and put you back down to that comfortable seat where you are doing nothing at all. While Aleksandar Rakic is busting his ass, and even though he was afraid to pull the trigger in his fight against Thiago Santos, I believe he still has that contender mindset. Like, hey, I want to challenge for the title. I want to fight for the title. While Jan Blachowicz was, I reached the peak and I fell off the cliff. Now, the big question of this fight is, can Jan Blachowicz pick himself up? So let's look at the skill set of these both fighters. This fight is gonna be a stand-up kickboxing striking fight. Both fighters like stand-up. Aleksandar Rakic is a very good kickboxer. Jan Blachowicz has a very good kickboxing stand-up. Like he managed to trade with Israel Adesanya and strike with him, who was a professional kickboxer and is one of the best strikers. So no one can be like, hey, Jan Blachowicz doesn't have a good stand-up. Well, the only weakness that we could see in Jan Blachowicz's game is the mental game and maybe the ground game, as the Glover Texeira basically disposed of him very easily. So this fight is gonna be in a stand-up. I think Aleksandar Rakic knows that Jan Blachowicz has very heavy hands and has a big power in his hands. So I think this fight can be similar as Aleksandar Rakic versus Thiago Santos. You'll have two strong fighters that have a strong stand-up, but they might be a little too afraid to commit, to pull the trigger, to fight a little bit more. So let's see what can happen. What do you guys think? I believe that Jan Blachowicz is going to win decision unless he beats himself mentally. And I'm afraid that that's exactly what's gonna happen. But I still believe Jan Blachowicz still has something left in him, and I really hope he can win. But it's one of those fights where no matter who wins, I will be glad, because both guys are great, humble, and just amazing fighters. So what do you guys think? Right now, let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you next one. Cheers.